The internet is working. How cool is that, huh? How cool is that? We thought 6 months ago that the internet wouldn't be able to hold up with all the traffic that was going back and forth because work from home, because everyone's got to order their toilet paper on Amazon.com, because Zoom no one had ever used before, and we're doing hangouts with 40 people, and apparently someone's private parts would just show up and be in your Zoom call. And the internet still works. How cool is that? I am constantly blown away by how cool the internet is. Happy Friday, my friends. What do we have? We have Starbucks very melty pumpkin cream cold brew. Looks like pumpkin curb. God, if only acronym was sounded out loud. Sometimes I wish I was in the military just so I knew cool acronyms. My brother would always talk in acronyms. Hey, Tommy, I'm going to be in the AOE this weekend. So what? Was it AOE? AOW? AOO? AOO? Area of Operations? Twombo, going to be in the AOO this weekend. What you doing? Let's get a burger. Let's get a chocolate chip cookie. That was my brother's favorite, chocolate chip cookies. And then he'd have to go run 5 miles. So we're recording. We're going to continue where we picked up yesterday. I did a little bit more work on this drawing, and I'm having fun. It's cool. I found myself in a little bit of groove. Yesterday, we worked out most of the poses and got foreground, middle ground, background, and now we're getting into that on a deeper level. So we're doing foreground, middle ground, background, but on each element of the character itself to create depth within the characters. So yesterday it was, let me see if I still have that layer. It looks like I might still have the layer. We started with some line work, then we put in some basic tones behind that. I believe we started with 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, and behind the line work, that's what that looks like. And then we kept going with it and then painting over the whole thing here on its own separate layer. What's a good thing to do before I forget is let's save a version 2 on that. I like to have multiple versions of my files because it's an old holdover from working in 3D Max in the early 2000s when that software was quite unstable and you would have files go corrupt. And if there wasn't an auto back file, you were just SOL. So what you did was you would incrementally save new files. They actually have that feature built into Max, little plus symbol next to the save file thing because that's there because those files corrupted so often. You could do incremental saves, and if something happened, you can go back to an earlier version. It was kind of like a local version of source save for those who are my developer friends out there. You know what Perforce is, you know what GitHub is. For the young students out there, source save is usually some kind of software that ran on a server where you could back up your local documents and upload it to a server somewhere else. Now maybe it's cloud backup, kind of the same thing, but this was even more direct. So you might, let me give you an example of what that looks like. If I'm working on a 3D thing, I did a project for my friend Anthony Dittman a little while ago, and let me see if there's a 3D model folder. Yeah, my model folder has all of these versions, like Trashbox 1 through 28. So I was incrementally saving about every hour or so that I was working on this project a new version. And I was also labeling what part of the process I was in. That's pretty good if I want to go back and get something that I might have lost before. So when you work in a game dev environment, you're collaborating with a lot of different people who are from a lot of different backgrounds. Therefore, you're going to want to be as clear as possible and have set up a lexicon, if you will, or a language that's local to the studio that everyone can get on board with. Just like acronyms in the military. Those acronyms and those ways of saying things are so that anybody in a 4 million man military can get on the same radio and that order will be understood across the board. Clarity is important. I'm not saying game development is like the military, but in some ways it takes some cues. from lessons. Like the military is just an old institution, right? It's one of the oldest institutions of order and logistics, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Okay, so what do we have going on with the drawing? Let's evaluate real quick. It's good when we get started to do a little bit of a self-critique. Is it working as a drawing in general? It feels a little ghostly because there's some colors and there's mostly black and white. Is it balanced? We have like two medium-sized guys on the left, a big guy and a smaller guy on the right. It's not my most balanced drawing, but it's kind of getting the point across. This character is still a little bit flat, so he feels like he needs the most work. The guy here needs a little bit more work. I wanted to get some more ground to top gradient. That's something I learned from Valve's art guide on Dota 2. They did an art guide on Dota 2, and they hand paint in a gradient. Lower on the figure is going to be darker than higher on the figure. And part of that is because the game is being viewed from a top point of view. So it's like, instead of looking at let's say this is a character. Instead of looking at him on the profile side, you're looking at him from top-down point of view. And to exaggerate the depth, we're going to paint in lighter on top and darker at the bottom on this thing. Maybe this is a better example if I flipped it upside down. So imagine boots and upper torso kind of thing. Suddenly it works. See, this suddenly flattens it out. Like if you have black on top and gray on the bottom, it's not as obvious what's the top and bottom as if we flipped it around. Does that make sense? Over here, how does that look? Does that make sense? Something like that. I thought I had a good example. Wasn't as good as I thought it was. Welcome to the show. If anyone's tuned in, if you're coming in, it's going to be on YouTube later. Thanks for checking it out. My name is Tom Symonds, and we're going to draw a little bit. My history in my professional career is 15 years of game development, Firaxis Games, Zynga, Stardock, and Mohawk Games. We bounce around a bit. Not every game studio is the same. Everyone's a little bit different, and you learn lessons wherever you go. Sometimes you realize the best game studio is the one you just left once you've gone to a new place. Out of the frying pan into the fire, as it were. The grass is not always greener, ladies and gentlemen, but I think for long-term growth, it's worth moving around and trying different things. It's kind of like a kung fu master. Let's say you're trying to be a kung fu master, like Bruce Lee. In his day, he was all about that gung fu. He was into just the Chinese styles. I think, I really shouldn't talk about Bruce Lee. I don't know anything about Bruce Lee. I just watched a 30 for 30 documentary. But today, the modern martial arts masters are doing multiple styles and integrating. Look at my favorite MMA fighter, Stylebender. Stylebender's mixing all kinds of stuff. Some Muay Thai, some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, all kinds of stuff. And that's going to be, your best fighter is going to be the one who has tried a bunch of different styles and has incorporated what works into their method. I love seeing an MMA fighter come back from Thailand and incorporate some of that Muay Thai and change their game up. It radically changes their stance from punching and kicking and delivering off the front leg, which is, I think, a very Western thing to do because of sports, like sports in general, football, baseball. You're pivoting off that front leg and creating some kind of moment arm. So you point that leg and then kind of catapult over it. Whereas in Muay Thai, from my inexperience watching eyes, you're leaning on your back foot so that you can quickly kick with your front foot. So your front foot's more of a weapon that can deliver a knee or a kick or something. It's a very different style, and if you're not prepared for it, it can be kind of alarming. Same thing with art. Let's try different styles, try different things. My method might not work for you. Maybe you experiment with it, and it opens your eyes up to something else. So different methods. My method is complete amalgamation and mess of different things. Some people like to do these super refined line drawings, super tight line drawings, and then coloring them in later. Some people go right to paint, to form, to shape, and develop from there. I do a hybrid where I'm going back and forth between line and color fill. And I think that comes from my favorite medium in art school that wasn't digital would have been Vine charcoal on paper. Probably newsprint was the smoothest. Very, very smooth to work in that platform. And digital is super smooth. It's glass smooth. Glass and plastic smooth. I know some people, like my friend Chris, like the rough side of things. How's the broadcast? Are we reaching anybody? I hope we are. If not, this is getting me working, and that's good enough. So I recommend anything. If you out there are having a hard time doing work, you feel like you're somebody who needs to be held responsible to do work. Someone's got to watch you in order to do work. You're distracted. You have ADD. Just try streaming. Maybe someone will watch you. Seems to be working for me for a bit. So foreground, middle ground, background within an object itself. That's how you're going to really make your object pop. So let's say this box of ammunition right here. The foreground will be this corner. Let's lighten that corner up, and then let's create a gradient shadow on every edge that's slightly going away from it. And the steeper the gradient, the steeper the edge. So this side, this face is going steeply into the background. So we're going to have a bigger rate of change. I'm just lightly kind of glazing it in. You can use the smudge tool. It will do some really good stuff too. Smudge, it's a little hidden, but you can use the smudge tool to make a nice smooth gradient by making dark, light, and then smudging in between. That's pretty handy to do. I use the smudge tool sometimes at the last phase of my drawing if I want this thing to be really, really smooth and slick. At this pen release stage, it's silly to use the smudge tool at this level because it's just too early, but you can see the effect. Suddenly we have a retreating face that is informing the viewer of the shape, of what the shape is. Switch back to a brush. Cool. So then we're going to lighten up this right side of that face. Are these shapes coming out or going back in? I think they're coming towards the viewer, so I'll just lighten it up just very lightly and then blend by picking the color and then glazing next to it. It's fine. This is not a huge deal. On the top, this is going to be lighter because it's collecting light from above. Our light source is going to be generally, that's something, it's a little ambiguous. These guys look like they're being hit with flash photography a little bit because I'm heavily using depth to define them. So it looks like there's a flashlight being hit on them. All right, so let's do a quick overlay to add some lighting to this scene and individual like volume within the pieces themselves. I'm going to shadow this real quick. So let's create a new layer. This is going to be fun. And I'm going to use the layer blending modes to lighten and darken and create a sense of verticality and also a source of light. I'm imagining this is going to be a gray day, kind of like what we have outside in Pennsylvania today, but this is going to be winter. It's going to be Ukraine. So what am I going to do? Let's do a overlay, and we're just going to work up and down the grayscale. Let's do a little bit lighter, and I'm going to use a very soft round brush. So this is like an airbrush kind of quality. It's soft on the edges. It's also pressure sensitive. And let's just give a little bit of highlight. What is this? 69%. Let's make it a nice even 70%. And we're just going to lightly glaze on up here. On the tops of the characters, let's go a little higher. Let's go 100%. So we're just going to glaze on the tops of the characters a little bit. Things that are on the top will just get a little bit more light. Just a little bit. Surfaces that are pointing up towards the sky, just a little bit. The front of this rifle just going to get a little bit more of a hit. Top of the forehead, top of the forearm here, the upper part of the plates, maybe these grenade pouches, top of this guy's shoulder pads, top of his spectacles. Just painting in a little highlights from the sky. This is going to make these dudes feel like they are in the same lighting environment, just a little bit. Things that are looking up. Okay, so just a little highlight. Let's do at 30% or 40%. this background object, this tank back here. Let's give it the same little bit of highlight that's coming from the sky above. Nice and soft, it's subtle. That's pretty cool. It's still going to be darker because I want it to fit into the background, but just a little bit of, you know, some light collection going on. I don't know, just something like that. Makes it feel like we're all in the same scene together. Some consistency. Just a little bit on the treads, maybe. We can do little details later. I'm kind of squinting my eyes just a hair to get to see more of the tones in general and less on the specifics themselves. Now let's go to the dark side. Let's go down to a black. Let's keep it at 40% because I don't want things getting too dark. And we're just going to glaze in some shadows. Let's start at the ground. We're going to darken the feet on all these characters. To really darken that foot down. Dark, 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 dark. So what's nice about this method is you can make lots and lots of marks and affect things very subtly. So you can be a little sloppier, but also still have control. Darks in the midsection where there's a lot of gear and less light getting to. Darken, darken, darken. Really get those feet darkened up because that foot's so bright. I might need to come in and hit that with something more. There, dark, dark, cool. So this is making it a little bit more dynamic, and it's feeling like it's actually being lit by some kind of overlaid type sun, some kind of cloudy skybox type thing. A little shadow for the tank, shadow for these guys. So that shadow grounds the characters in the scene. Cool. So let's see before and after. What's nice about this being, ooh, looks like I changed it to a soft light instead of an overlay. Overlay is what I originally wanted. Soft light was a more subtle version of that. Interesting. We can see that difference pretty clearly. I like the overlay a little bit better. You can dial it back by making it thinner. So let's say completely off. You have a pretty flat drawing, and just that little bit of work, suddenly we have some ambient occlusion. These guys feel like they're in the same lighting environment. They're being lit. This is really starting to pop now. Just one quick layer with some glazing over some lights, darkening the bottom, lightening the top. This is starting to feel a lot better. So let's go back to the whole process. Line work, tonally establishing foreground, middle ground, background, developing internal foreground, middle ground, background within the objects themselves. It's like, for instance, the arm, it's lit closest to us, and it's starting to shadow as it's going around the contour. And then lastly, an overlay of the lighting environment itself, establishing top, bottom, what's facing the sky, and what else is it. I might also use this to lighten the background at 40%. So there's going to be some kind of sky. I'm just going to glaze in just a little bit of like highlight up top, and then some background. I don't know. Maybe this is a tree line deep in the background here. Maybe it's just a backdrop of a set, something like that. That feels pretty good, right? Little vignetting. I love a little vignetting in an illustration where it's a little darker on the edges, like an old school, old-timey photograph. That's fun for me. So this is cool. This has a lot of mood to it. Like it's a sinister, dark scene, but these are relatable characters in the foreground and a big guy who's being a little bit silly in the middle. So this is feeling pretty good. Let's save this and then take what we see and copy it to a new layer. So we have everything before. Let's copy it again. I'm going to call that last thing we just drew is going to be overlaid lighting. Calling that Russian line work, Russian gross depth establishing volume, overlaid lighting, and we're going to Control Shift C to copy everything visible, Control V to do a new layer, and we're going to call that complete grayscale drawing. What happens if we take all the saturation out of this? Would this feel more consistent? Control U. If it's all consistently gray, it does feel a little bit better. Because right now we have completely desaturated and bluish characters here. Like if I crank the saturation up, we can see what's going on. Whoa, that's pretty surreal, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? This is feeling like psychedelic just by cranking that saturation up. It's like have some accidental colors super popped. Wow. If I could just print that up and put it on the wall, it might be kind of fun. So do we embrace the color at this point, or we just sacrifice it completely and go back to something else? I don't know. It's kind of fun. Maybe I'll just save this as a version, because that's something about that's very interesting to me. Some of those happy accidents, like that red tank with a little bit of red light here against the blue. I don't know how that happened, but it's fun against this orange on the bottom. I'm going to hold on to this and maybe save it for later. And so I'm going to call that one flat experimental color. Maybe I'll revisit it. And then we'll make another layer, because this is Photoshop, and we can do whatever we want. Call this flat gray, which is fun. So we're just going to take the color out of that by hitting Control Shift U, automatic dropping that punk out. So what do we got? Anyone watching today? Anyone tuning in? Say hi if you're here. That would be cool to hear from you. It's Friday, ladies and gentlemen, 3 o'clock. What do I listen to while I draw? Some people ask that question. Right now, I'm listening to Annie Letterman. She is a really funny stand-up comic. She's done a whole bit about being 14 in the 90s, and I relate. And then we got Joe Rogan, we got Larry Vickers, we got ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm really excited this afternoon. I'm going to listen to The Art of Craftsmanship, the Big Wind and Four Brothers podcast. My buddy Dustin and his younger brother Devin talking about whatever they're doing. Dustin makes a really cool wood knives and all kinds of fun stuff. Carpenter Brew, Blood Machines original soundtrack. Listening to that. Got a lot going on. I want to thank my friend Amber for turning me on to Mr. Kitty. It's a band that plays a song called Dark or something. And that was pretty dope. But much respect for Amber for giving me tunes, like sharing whatever the new jam is. It's good to have a friend that can keep you abreast on the hot music. Maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's a niece, maybe it's your older mentor. Gotta have some jams. Cool. What would be next at this process? Flip the canvas. Let's see if it's still balanced. Image rotation, flip it horizontal. Well, what we have right here is an open space, I'm suddenly noticing here, and a very busy, congested space over here. Then an empty bit of space down in this area. What should we do to remedy that? It might be good to invent some kind of object to occupy this space to balance that out. I'm thinking about some kind of infrared spotlight type thing that I used to see on tanks way back in the day. So maybe we just do something like this, and then there's like a device that, I don't know, maybe looks some kind of blocky sensor package thing. That could be fun. Something that's in the gray area, just occupying a little bit of whatever. This looks like a cable that's plugged in, so it's got some digital component to it. Maybe there's like a little gap where it's supported, and maybe there's like a pivot. I don't know what this device is, but I'm already liking it. It's kind of fun. And it's just balancing off the composition by having an object there. It takes a little, that took 2 seconds to draw, but suddenly it's an object of curiosity. We can develop, something from there. It's kind of fun. Let's blend in the background color to, that's good. I don't know, just kind of making some fun marks. Let's see, some shapes. I don't know. It's kind of cool. A little bit of a camouflage, right? What's sticking out at this point? What's sticking out and alarmingly not done or bad? This foot right here is jumping out at me. I don't want it to jump out at me. The self-critique is very important. To know what a good self-critique is, you probably have to get critiqued by a lot of friends, relations, teachers, faculty. It's really good to see critique. A friend of mine, Steve, inspires me. Steve Agri inspires me. He's an art director over at Big Huge right now. He is the best at soliciting feedback. He's really good at it, and everyone likes him because he asks honestly and humbly, "What do you think? Hey, Tom, what do you think about this?" And I said, "Steve, I am thrilled to help you because you asked so nicely and so politely and humbly, what do I think? I will give you my honest opinion." And there is a method to giving your honest opinion in a way that isn't offensive of people. You know, sometimes you might want to offend people, but ultimately, as I've learned, as you get older and older and older, the people who give you honest feedback were actually looking out for your best interest. Even if it was harsh, when you were younger, if someone told you exactly what they thought and it was harsh, you got to write that shit down. You got to write, because when you get older, you don't hear that honest feedback much anymore, because when you get older, you know what you learn? You realize that honest feedback actually helps somebody. So if you're only getting compliments or you're hearing nothing, try to switch your friend group up. Try to find some people who will give you the honest feedback. Because as you get older, it's going to be more competitive. You're realizing how competitive the world is, how dog-eat-dog the world is, and what's going to make you better are people who are going to be honest with you. Okay, so how do you be honest with a friend? There's something called the compliment sandwich. Compliment, criticism, compliment. So it's like you're giving them, like, here's a glove to catch the ball I'm going to throw to you. Here's the ball. And then I'm going to put my glove on and give you an opening to throw the ball back to me, if that's what you want to do. So, for example, if I was to criticize, okay, other Tom, multiple personality Tom, was looking at this drawing, wants to give criticism, I would say, this is a very interesting character. I think you really need to work on the proportions and dynamic nature of the legs. They don't hold up with the same level of detail and care as the face. But I like where you're going, and you seem like you have the skill set to complete this in a good way. That's an example of the compliment sandwich, ladies and gentlemen. Got a message from the Facebook. Joe says she got her Apple Watch up and running again, and she's very happy about it. Awesome. And I spelled awesome wrong. I wrote aums. Aums. That's when you put the S at the end instead of in the middle. Aums. Aums. Notifications. L's watching. L likes that I'm broadcasting. Thank you, L. You can watch me anytime. What are we working on? So let me listen to that feedback I just gave myself. Let's refine and do something exciting with the legs here. They're probably a little thick, but then again, the reason that the legs are going to be thick is because they're wearing power armor. They're wearing some kind of mechanical exoskeleton. So I'm thinking this is some kind of boot that is underneath of some like strapped apparatus. Let's think about some of the details of how this equipment goes together. Is it going to be Velcro? Is it going to be laced? Lacing seems like something that's very Russian. So let's just lean into lacing here. That could be fun, and then we can have some cool little like accoutrements of the lace kind of falling off. Maybe we invent. Let's just give life to the lace itself. Maybe the dude tucked it in here. The little details, and you can invent little stories. And if you can place yourself, meditate on and think about what's happening in this world, if you could invent little stories of some care that happened. This individual had to lace his gear up this morning, and he tied an interesting little knot in it. That's going to give it a little bit of life and personality, and it's going to make it feel more real. That's how these things work. Give it a little bit of thought, and a little bit of imagined history, it's going to feel real. That's something that Star Wars did really well. That art department gave a little bit of history, a little bit of life to everything. I think Adam Savage probably talks about it on his Tested podcast. Should have had a glass of water. Review of the pumpkin cream cold brew. Fantastic. It's $5, but $5 for this amount of energy? You know it. Come on, man. Go into debt for that kind of energy. Cheaper than cocaine, I bet. Oh, the flies are back. Ladies and gentlemen, I grilled some food last week for a couple friends. And it's so hard to keep that screen door closed while you're grilling. You're moving into the house, out of the house, from the kitchen, and where you're prepping stuff out to the grill. Flies going to come in. So now I got like 3 flies in my house. This is why I don't kill my spiders, because spiders eat those flies, and I'll live with a spider over a fly. Unless the spider gets real big, then I got to take him outside. What am I excited about this weekend, ladies and gentlemen? It is 9/11. I got to talk about that. I got to talk about 9/11. America, 9/11. I was in freshman year, critical inquiry. Who would have thought that critical inquiry 19 years later would be such a controversial subject? I'm glad I took it, but now I understand what the deal with that class is and why today I call that class Bullshit 101. It's how to bullshit. It never felt real. It felt like taking critical inquiry as a freshman in art school felt like freshmen were being given the keys to the institution, and the key is just make up stuff to justify what you're doing. And here we are later, intersectional whatever theory is just like emotional imagination, fantasy imagination on whatever reality is. It isn't the Socratic method. It isn't tested. It isn't realistic. It's just, hey, there's a brick, and we have a red line tied to the brick, and it represents the institution, the patriarchy of the institution. And people think about it, if I was high enough, yeah, I could see why the red line going through a brick would represent the blood vein of an oppressed people tied to the brick, which could represent society, and it could represent, bricks get stacked, and that's the hierarchy, and therefore this is a brick out of the wall, and it means that there's a break in the hierarchy of society, and the red line is what was punished because someone was out of line when they punished an individual, and red is blood, and blood is death, and that's critical inquiry. That's the critique process. It's fun, but it's not real. It's just stream of consciousness. So you got to recognize those two things. Like if you want to be creative, the stream of consciousness is where you want to go. And that's why it's important for art school. But if you want to define reality, stream of consciousness might be a place to start, but it's not what you want to fall back on. It's not a hill you want to die on. You got to get ready to abandon those ideas as quick as you came up with them. I mean, if you only spent 5 milliseconds coming up with an idea for a stream of consciousness kind of conversation, you got to be ready to abandon that within 5 milliseconds because it can be completely wrong because you're not basing on it evidence. Evidence would say Jimmy didn't want to spend any time on this assignment, and he found a brick on the way to school and had some red twine in his pocket, tied a knot, and decided to come up with some bullshit theory on the way to school and justify why he smoked weed all last night and didn't actually do his homework. Meanwhile, the rest of the class has spent like 12 hours drawing something that's actually good, demonstrating a skill. So having a skill in the long run, I think is way better. I bet Jimmy today is plumbing. That's what I would assume. Or is a trans model on the West Coast, selling unisex, omnisex, every sex tank tops. That's what Jimmy's doing. Let me go by Jamie now, probably. I don't know. I'm making this whole thing up. Let's go. Let's go back to drawing because that's what you guys are here for. Yo, I can see my posts now. L's here. Drew's here. What up, Drew? Yeah. Joe says conceptual art shouldn't be allowed until the student has shown they know how to do the skills first. I agree, Joe. I agree. Be able to draw. I think the reason that they did this in freshman year is because to get into MICA, you had to demonstrate a certain artistic portfolio to begin with. So they assume you already know how to make stuff, and that was a problem for me because I didn't know how to paint. I came to art school having a pretty strong drawing portfolio, inkblot portfolio, but I didn't know how to oil at all. And I got thrown into this oil class where they assumed you knew how to oil, and it was just going to be theory. And I was failed, terribly failed. But we're back to 9/11. Where was I? I was in critical inquiry class. My teacher was half Afghani, and I wanted to leave because my brother was traveling to the Pentagon pretty often. The Pentagon got hit, but she made us all stay in that class. Looking back on it, I should have just walked out. I should have just walked out and came back the next day and taken the late or whatever it was, or taken the knock in the grade, because that class was bullshit anyway. Now, I learned stuff from that teacher, but did I learn like $1,000 worth of stuff? I don't know. Maybe I learned that, bullshit can get you pretty far. It can't get you all the way, but it can get you pretty far in life. It can get you pretty far in an institution that loves bullshit. You got to be careful of a place like that, man. If you find yourself having to come up with BS in order to survive, that institution is not going to be a happy place for you for very long. It's time to start looking for the exits. When you realize that you need to change who you are to survive in the situation you're in. It's going to lead to anxiety. It's going to lead to stress. It's going to lead to hopefully not substance abuse, but it could lead to substance abuse if you're not really careful with it. You're just going to be unhappy with your life. Go find something else to do. Go find something else to do, or at least mentally detach from it. My mother always said integrity is number one. So you got to look out for number one. You got to be yourself. And people will remember down the road what you chose to do in certain situations. My man L would tell me what's going on behind closed doors. All right, Tommy, this is what's actually going on. Here's a glass of vodka, splash of cranberry. This is what's actually going on. You're a good man. Keep doing your thing. And I'd be like, you're a good man too, L. Thanks for this vodka. This is awesome. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 3:22 on a Friday. 9/11, 19 years. I remember driving through New York City, and when those towers were no longer there, it was heavy. It was heavy, that smoke. I almost went to Pratt for school, and I think Pratt closed because there was so much ash falling on Brooklyn from the World Trade Center that had blown up. I knew, Rebecca Scott, to this day, I don't know if she remarried and what her last name is, but my prom date's father was stuck on one of the higher floors of one of the trade centers as it collapsed. So rest in peace, Mr. Scott, a member of my church. So everyone knew somebody that was affected. And then, boy, friends of mine went off to war. David Smith, much respect. My art brother from high school and elementary school went and joined the Marines, went and invaded a country. Dude, much respect to you, man. If you ever see this, know that never-ending respect for that. My buddy Ryan Driscoll, growing up, went into the Army, was already in the process. I think Brendan and Mario, guys I knew from hockey, went overseas, did the thing. Mario was an MP. Did Brendan go overseas? I assumed he did. Algebra class buddy Stan Razonkovich went over. Dude, a lot of them, I thought about it, but I had asthma and no discipline. I went to West Point for football camp. I was really thinking about enlisting. After 9/11, I was like, maybe I should jump in the fight. We had a South African artist come and visit and do a lecture, and he was in the military, and his work was dope. It had a lot of chevrons and stripes and this kind of construction kind of process. And I thought, dude, if he did it, like, you can go to the military and then become an artist afterwards, and you'll have all this knowledge and experience and interesting stories and stuff. Maybe I should do that. But then again, I had a teacher in high school named Dr. Anastasio. And Dr. A said, Tom, you don't need to go to the military. I was in Vietnam. It's horrible. You can draw. You don't have to do it. And so that was in my head too. And my brother Tim was in it. My brother Tim, cousin Nathan. Nathan went and dropped and captured a couple airfields. I think he dropped into Afghanistan with the Rangers. Love and respect to him. My brother Tim went over later in the 2010s. Went over as an officer for a little bit. Did a lot of work for the government. I want to get into the details there on a public podcast. So 9/11, what did it mean for my family? Well, family members of mine got deployed. One of them got injured. My brother said he saw some horrible things over there and was quite disillusioned by it all. How do I feel about the global war on terror? Well, it kind of it's one of those things that probably should have been the global war on terror probably should have been more of a private policy. And W or Obama or whatever says the United States will not stand by terrorism. If we see terrorism, we're going to attack it. But the way they put it, global war on terror, was kind of like the global war on drugs. It was ambiguous. There was no defined end goal. If you, I think, if as a student of history, if you want to declare war, you need to have a very specific set of goals and objectives that not only counter the current problem, but can help mitigate future problems. And I don't think there was any, the W administration did not have a realistic plan. They had a fantasy plan for what would happen, but they did not have a realistic plan for what was going to happen in Afghanistan or Iraq. They just said whatever comes next is going to be better than what's there now. The Taliban and the Ba'ath Party, Saddam. Those are just bad actors in the world. We just got to get rid of them. But they didn't think about what the end game would be. They should have learned from Charlie Wilson's war. You got to invest in Afghanistan. We screwed that up in the 80s after the Soviets got out. In Iraq, you got to have a strong central government because it's a tribal region. We didn't understand that either. We have three divisions within Iraq: the Kurds in the north, the Sunnis, and the Shia. And we didn't know that they were this powder keg ready to erupt, in the general idea of it. So 9/11, what I think we should have done is just gone 300,000 coalition into Afghanistan, secured it, rebuilt Kent like Kabul, and started to bring civilization, trade, and lots of security and construction. And when partnering with China, Russia, and the U.S. to create a international zone for mining exploration and like job growth and stuff like that. I don't know, some kind of major invasion, occupation for 4 years, and then growth, training, whatever it is. A lot of schools. And then you need a F ton of security. You need like 500,000 people to do that because Afghanistan's huge and it's got these divided. You just can't maintain security on a place that big, the size of Texas, with only 50,000 troops and a illiterate police force. It's absolutely brutal. So 9/11, we lost like 4,000 Americans. Flight 93, heroes. Pennsylvania, there was the crowd. I need to go out there. I need to go one of these days. I want to drive out, maybe when friends visit, maybe we go to see the Flight 93 memorial out in central Pennsylvania. We lost, 3,000 to 4,000 people in the initial attack, but then we lost like 5,000 Americans fighting back, and the global war on terror has killed a lot of civilians. I heard 1 million dead in Iraq, because of the sectarian violence, along with civilian casualties, the drone war. The question is, was it worth it? Was that response worth it? I don't know about Iraq. I think we could have done Iraq better, but Afghanistan definitely could have done better. I think Iraq was a distraction from what was the real important fight was in Afghanistan, and we should have worked with the Indians and the Chinese a little bit closer because it's more their turf, man. It's more their turf. I would love to hear a counter argument from someone who was in the military, if they want to say, oh, no, we did it right, and this is the reason we had to do it right. I've heard the argument, well, we had to take the fight to them. As long as we were fighting our enemies on their turf, they weren't coming. They were too busy fighting us on their turf to come over to our turf and mess things up over here. And maybe that's the super secret story that I'm never going to hear, is like what would have been the cost for another 9/11. Let's say that bin Laden was still active and was able to plan some attack on Los Angeles with a dirty bomb. That price is so unimaginable that maybe it was worth it. Maybe the $3 trillion spent to wage the global war on terror was worth not getting a dirty bomb dropped in Los Angeles. And the proof of that is look at World War II. World War II was so devastating to the entire planet that it's worth having a military that can fight on 3 fronts just to deter another one. Because it was so horrible. World War I, World War II wiped out all the wealth of the entire 19th century and delayed, procrastinated, retarded growth for 25 years in Europe. Something like that. What do you think, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. Elle, Drew, Joe, any other likes? What else we get? Sean Porter likes this today. Thanks, Sean. Cool, cool, cool. Thanks for tuning in here in the Tom Rant. We're drawing a Russian right here. I think the Russians are more of our allies than our enemies. I think what's going on in, we at least can relate with the Russians. They're like, I think that Russia in a lot of ways is like our fun-loving, drunk cousin. I mean, Southerners and Russians have a lot in common. Just one's like, like ice punk, and the other is humid punk. There's something. They both love mudding, driving trucks in the mud. Both love really cool military hardware. Both love the wilderness and the frontier. Both have gotten stuck in Afghanistan for over 9 years. We have more in common with Russia than we don't. They got the Bolshoi. They love art, painting. They love dance. They love hip hop. They love vodka. We love vodka. Come on. We got more in common than they don't. See, like places like North Korea, like we got so little in common with North Korea. That's who I'm really worried about. Drew says, I'm with you, brother. Thanks, Drew. I got to mention your brother went over to Iraq. I got to mention Derek went over. Absolutely. So friends of mine had family deployed. He went over. His stories from the GWAT are crazy, from an invasion of Iraq. So here's an argument I like to make for those. I like to drive my liberal friends crazy. I love my liberal friends, but I like to drive them nuts by being unpredictable. And an argument I make, if they're like, well, why do you have to own guns, man? I'm like, well, I also believe that we should have a smaller standing army. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I don't think that there's any real chance of invasion, and I think we should be isolationist, and I think we can save, $400 billion a year having a smaller standing military or something like that. And they're like, wait, I thought you were pro-army, and that's the secret. I am. I'm huge pro military. I want a massive military. I want a massive military that trains constantly, and is constantly doing good things. It's basically Peace Corps, like basically military Peace Corps. You could send unarmed troops to places in Africa to help build villages and stuff, and that would be awesome. A massive military. I want to expand the military. I think there should be something called the Health Corps. I think the only way that you're going to get socialized medicine in the country is make it a 6th branch of the military. And they call it the Health Corps, and you give training to be nurses, doctors, that kind of stuff, and you set up bases that are actually medical facilities all over the United States. And it's a giant spending jobs program. I think that would be awesome. And then absolutely the DOD would fund it because they get an expansion on their budget, and there's more bureaucracy and whatnot like that. I think that's the only way you can do it in America, is have Health Corps, new thing, new freaking service, new branch of the military. Everyone gets training. And it's a great alternative to how expensive medical school is, and it gets you 75% of the way they get there. I mean, you could theoretically do most of what the United States needs to do militarily with just the Navy. Theoretically, you could do most of what you need with just the Navy. The evidence for that is England during World War II. You can do a lot with a naval deterrent. You're probably not going to get invaded. As evidenced by Operation Sea Lion never taking off. But they also had, you also had air domination stuff. I'm just riffing off the top of my head. But I think theoretically, like if you have every man, woman, and child in America knowing how to use a firearm, there's no way anyone's going to invade the United States of America. There's no way right now anyone's going to invade the United States of America. Not direct conventional invasion. As said in World War II, behind every blade of grass is a rifle by the Japanese High Command. There's no way you're landing troops on American soil. So, do we need a giant standing army? Probably not for defense reasons, but we have to have it for offensive reasons to deter anybody sparking up some kind of conflict around the world. Because global free trade is more valuable, is more important than the cost of having a standing army that's alive. Joe's like, how was your coffee today? You know how my coffee was today because I'm talking 5,000 words a minute, Joe. We had the Starbucks Grande Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew. That's what this acronym is telling us, this scribbled acronym. I can hear JoJo giggling over there. Like Tom has had a lot of caffeine. That cold brew is what's up. I gotta make some of that stuff because that is like triple caffeine. And it's like the difference between like an edible and a joint. Just that hit kind of creeps in, like it's a little sneaky, and then suddenly you are awake. So it's been a good 10 minutes just waiting. Hope that was fun, ladies and gentlemen. I know Drew's working out there. I know Elle's trying to work. You just want to hear about Tom rant about stuff. All right, what else can I rant about? Football last night was interesting. I feel bad for the Houston Texans. I mean, J.J. Watt's expression said everything last night. He's just handsome J.J. Watt. Love J.J. Watt. It's just like at the end of the game. And it's like because he knew he was going to lose, but he was hopeful that maybe we could do something. Maybe they wouldn't get blown out by the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe they can do something. My friend Dorian, or was it Steve? I forget. Maybe it was Steve who said it. It's like, well, you know, any defensive player is not going to have the same kind of impact as an offensive player because they're not in the play all the time. Like, it's just not likely that one guy on defense is really going to change the outcome of any given play. Like, the defense has to be perfect 100% of the time. The offense just has to be good 1 in 4 times, 25% of the time. And that's just the connection of the quarterback to a wide receiver that's deep, or the running back finds a hole and makes a breakaway. So the offense just has to be right 1 in 4. Defense has to be right all the time. Drew says, gotta try cold brew. Yeah, buddy, that's what's up. Cold brew. It's more expensive, but you can make it in your house. I got one of these toddies, and it's like a 24-hour in the fridge, like just saturate like a gallon of, like a half gallon of cold water with lots of ground coffee, and then you filter it at the end, and then it stays in your fridge for like 3 weeks as a concentrate. It's called the toddy, Toddy. I got it from the. It's so strong though, because you forget to dilute it, so you pour it out of this carafe, and then you have like triple octane. It's basically like leaded gasoline, like 1950s 150 octane naval fleet aviation gasoline when you drink that. Just like, the Russians, they're coming! You might be asking, Tom, how'd you get to be so smart? Look, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I like what Joe Rogan has to say. He's not actually smart. He just listens to a lot of stuff and remembers things occasionally. I just hear what other people have told me and try to parrot it in a way that sounds like I came up with it myself. Like I got some kind of experience dealing with these things. No, I don't really have that much experience with global geopolitics. I just like reading about it, hearing about it. The Tom Pinion. What do you think about Egypt? I'd love to go check it out someday. I'd love to go to Morocco someday. Marrakesh. Get some food. See the sights. Feel the sunlight upon my face. What's going on? Let's define a thing there. That's cool. What's standing out as being really bad? The front of this rifle is really bright. Let's tone that down just a bit. Tone it down. It's a little dirty. Let's get little marks, maybe a little excitement. You know, a couple scratches and doing some dents and stuff. It's fun. Drew, you sailing this weekend? You gonna be on the boat? It's nice weather. It's 74. The sky's clearing up. Beautiful in central Pennsylvania right now. That'll be nice on the boat, on the bay this weekend. What am I going to do my weekend? I think I'm going to play a bit of Control. I might go get a sandwich from my buddy Josh tomorrow. There's a fundraiser. It's doing some pit beef. Might go check that out. Spying on my neighbors taking the trash in right now. What are these pouches? I had like ammo up high. These were supposed to be like grenades. Maybe we'll like detail those up a little bit. Really excited for some videos coming out of the primary and secondary training summit that was this past weekend out in like Idaho somewhere. A couple veterans I follow, veterans of the GWAT, make video content, and I love seeing their training stuff. I can't afford to take classes with them right now, but the little free gems or Patreon $5 a month gems of information that they give, big time fan of. Do like all that kind of stuff. Let's make this a medical pouch. Maybe that'll be cool. Let's just do a little medical thing here. Just use the blue force gear. It looks kind of like a crosshair, but it's also like a med business. It's kind of cool. Oh, fun. Hey, Devin's here. He says, hello. Finally caught a live Facebook session. Devin, you handsome devil. I want to do a drawing of you four brothers. I might. This is so funny. Look, you got Drew there. Looking tough. Looking like, you guys look like high lung. Let me show you what high lung is. This is my favorite. You know, if I'm feeling like I need to pick me up, I want to feel good about. You know, society has told me being a white guy is a terrible thing. Apparently, you know, cisgender white straight male is just like the worst, just the freaking worst. Then I gotta go, you know, fire up. I gotta fire up my tribal ancestry culture. You know, this is the secret that no one wants to understand. The reason white guys run the world is because once upon a time, we were crazy Vikings. Crazy, pagan-fueled, insane, magical, demonic, like freaking zombie. And that can ruin other people's day. Dude, I don't want a Viking showing up now, even if they didn't have guns. You seen Vikings with guns? The Finns? Dude, I'm not messing with the Finns. Finnish, let's go look up the Finnish military. These guys will wreck your things. They will take over your life if they were a bigger country. It is a look, the Winter War dudes, they were out there fighting the Germans. The Finns held off Russia in the Winter War in the woods. Like you weren't like the average Finnish guy killed like 50 Russians. These guys were bonkers. And they're just savages hiding in the woods with Suomi machine pistols. They look like nice, friendly individuals, but they're hunters. And they'll shoot 10 people before they even get one bullet their way. That's what you gotta be worried about, man. And that's where it comes from. And you realize, oh, once upon a time, there was this wolf pack. And I'm not talking about the German U-boats. That's its own thing. I mean, that's a whole nother lecture. That's a whole nother rant. So, but today we realized, okay, 500 years ago, yeah, we conquered everything. Let's let everyone else come up. Let's let everyone else come up to where we are. Devin said there's a black and white Beatles photo I want to recreate with this. Drew said we had to pause enough during laughing for this picture. You know, I think it's impressive. I think it's impressive that anyone can keep it together any time during these days. Yeah, man. The lethal potential of what Vikings became, like if you're a civilization player and you chose the Germanic people around Prussia 4,000 years, you get an Albert Einstein pops up in that region of the world. That pressure cooker, guns, germs, and steel, all that fighting, the Lutheran Reformation, the Civil War based on ideology, where one side saying only the church knows the word of God, and then Luther's like, wait a second, no, I'm going to translate this so everybody can read. God is accessible by everybody in society. We are all connected to God. We all have access to God. That fight led to thousands of deaths, thousands, almost civilization-ending civil war over there. When Northern Europeans put their mind to something, it changes the waves of that fallout affect the globe. Now you might say, Tom, that's not very nice. And I'm like, no, it's not, but it's real. Nature's not nice. Have you ever been stung by a bee? That's not nice, but it's nature. Honeybee makes honeybee makes that delicious sweet honey, but also it's got that little stinger. I got stung. I got stung for the first time in like 5 years by a bumblebee when I was walking to Chipotle. I'm like, ah! Why are you stinging me, bumblebee? Get off my shoes. So I was walking on his house. I didn't realize. I didn't know. I don't know, man. That's Tom's rant for today. I'm just trying to say that be wary of angry tribal Northern Europeans. They're going to mess up your business. One of my favorite things in television, there was this show called Deadliest Warrior, and it would compare, it would create fictional conflicts between, what if the samurai had to fight the Vikings? Was one of the episodes. And there was other episodes, like what if the L.A. SWAT had to fight the French Gigan, or what if militaries that never ever fought, like what if the Eskimos had to fight the Aborigines, silly stuff like that. But the Vikings versus the samurai were very interesting because the Norman Vikings, I think, were like 1200 A.D. and the samurai were like up to 1700 A.D. So there was like a 500-year gap between the Vikings and the samurai, but the Viking metal was better. The Viking chainmail could stop a samurai sword, and they had to give the fight to the Viking because everything the Vikings had could cut through samurai armor, but nothing the samurai had could cut through Viking armor. So only the bludgeoning weapons that the samurai had, like these long sticks and maybe an arrow if you got a headshot, was like the only thing that the samurai could do against the Vikings. Better metallurgy in Northern Europe. Apparently Japan had really crap iron, and that's why their steel had to be folded over so many times. It was so much work. It's kind of like espresso. Like the reason the Italians came up with espresso isn't because it's the best version of coffee. It's because the Italians had crap coffee beans. Like if they just had access to Colombian or Kona coffee, that's what they would have drank. It's way easier than having a pressurized, steam delivered extraction process for coffee beans and stuff. Now it seemed like a luxury. Like espresso is this like luxury way to get your coffee, but it's only because of weak beans. You had to invent this pressurized steam process for getting your coffee extraction. Look, this cold brew is kicking me, man. I'm gonna have a heart attack later. This cold brew is so darn good. Hilo, check it out. Devin said, haha, that cold creates animals. Dude, walls, dog. Have you ever seen a snow leopard? Oh, that's a cool animal. Got really excited with those Planet Earth episodes, the big kitties. It's weird to think that one time in Africa, like hundreds of thousands of years ago, was cold. Like at one point, like for you to have like tigers and stuff, like long-haired cats living in the savannah, it must have been cold once. Sometime the Earth, or like maybe a big, climate shift. You had a winter or something. I'm thinking like an octagonal kind of look going on here, and maybe I'll just lean into it because it feels pretty good. You get a circular lens inside of an octagonal housing. That feels pretty cool. Let's lean into that. This guy here. It's fun. So to take myself out of the hole I dug for the social justice movement thing, I think what people who are on the progressive side are trying to argue is like, look, we just want the same rights and privileges as everybody else. We're weird, we're queer, we're doing whatever we're doing. We're trying to reestablish that we're humans, but then like they're asking for privileges that they think are just given out and not earned or taken. Like, I think the conservative view is like whatever good you have in your world is something that you built yourself or your family, someone else in your family or lineage has built for you and established. And that like perceived privilege is what everyone else wants. And they'll like they just think like big government hands out these privileges, and no, it's kind of culture that decides what you can and cannot do. Like one thing that I find with a lot of the social movements is it's just kind of rude. It just seems rude. Like your message from a PR point of view, like you need better public relations because your point is getting dismissed because you guys are so rude. I think that's why Martin Luther King was like right, like suit up, be nonviolent. He wasn't rude. He was beautiful. He's eloquent. He convinced millions of white Americans to see the other side. Great PR. Great PR. What's going on now is not great PR. And you might say, well, people are dying. Why should you care about being rude when people are actually dying in the street because they are being oppressed? And I say, oh well, that message isn't coming across. you gotta work on your PR. You gotta work on your PR. Joanne says, speaking of animals, I've got a bunch of them attempting drifts around the traffic circle outside of my window. Thank goodness Vikings never had cars. Could you imagine Vikings with cars? I mean, would they be driving Saabs? Like, could you get a pimped out Saab 900 turbo? The car is so heavy, you need to like double the engine side. So you rip the cover off of the front of that car. You put a double turbo and a supercharger and a Saab engine. Screw it. You're just going to take a jet engine from one of their Saab jets, the Saab Viggen jet. You're going to take that, put it in a 900 turbo, and suddenly you got this 4,000 pound, 15,000 pounds of thrust jet engine in a Saab, and it's just dragging around the back end, and it just ends up in a field. But you didn't know that. Saabs make jets along with cars. Did Ford buy Saab? Something like that. Let's say that I kind of want like an upper part of the mask here. Just kind of brainstorm something. It's Friday, ladies and gentlemen. We're having fun. We're being righteously indignant. Righteously indignant. I read that phrase regarding 9/11 that some general, I don't remember who said, maybe it was Chuck Pressburg, 75th Rangers, saying like, we compared to what we had. Oh no, it was like some diplomat, some former general who's a diplomat was talking about peace in Afghanistan, was saying like we had the right to be righteously indignant for what happened to us. But let's wrap this war up. It's not benefiting anybody at this point. Look, Afghanistan, the West has finally realized we can't. England knew this 150 years ago. Russia knew this 40 years ago. You just can't. Westerners just ain't. Afghanistan's going to rule Afghanistan. It's kind of way like Tatooine is run by the Hutts, and the Empire is like, it's too much work. Star Wars Galactic Empire is like, Tatooine, this is too rough, man. That desert just does not work with our ATSTs. It just gets in all the gears. All that sand. It's not good. George Lucas knew Afghanistan was going to be a problem. Tatooine is Afghanistan of the Star Wars universe. Many have tried, no one succeeds in conquering. Tatooine's gonna Tatooine, dog. It's like haters gonna hate. Tatooine's gonna have tantrums, and the Galactic Empire doesn't know how to deal with that. It's gonna be a chaotic place because it is chaos incarnate. It's kind of like the old West. Like Texas has got a little bit of that attitude. Like it's a tough land. You ain't gonna control us. I'm sure Mexico is kind of the same way. Like any hostile environment is going to make the residents more hostile. Don't you think? Maybe that's why the Vikings. Maybe that ties into why the Vikings were so unruly. Thank God Wisconsin has beer. Otherwise, they'd be out of control. They'd be Vikings and Saabs with jet engines drifting around corners. Beer keeps them in check. That's what's up. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very silly podcast. It is 3:54. It's almost 4 o'clock. So I'm going to let you guys have a great old day. Devin said they would have just had an old Toyota pickup. Those Toyota pickups last forever. The Highlanders, the ones you see in the desert, covered with like mujahideen, with the bears. What are they called? Berbers? Not bears. Berbers in the desert with their camels and their Toyota pickup trucks. Drew or Devin, did you guys watch Top Gear back in the day? Clarkson, Hammond, James May, those guys going through the desert and they're like pickups and funny cars. Those were fun. Those were fun shows. I heard that the Irish are some of the hardest fighting dudes on the earth, and the O'Hara brothers, they got a lot of that. The Irish army is no joke. No joke. I didn't realize how big Ireland was. I was just looking at a map, and it's like the island of Ireland is like almost as big as the south part of UK. It's actually comparable in size. I grew up thinking that Ireland was going to be a lot smaller. Like it was this small nugget. It was like Staten Island compared to New York City and the 5 boroughs. No, Ireland's like almost the size. It's got like a third of the whole landmass, I think. Devin says, yes, sir. Drew says, yup. Devin says, Grand Tour 2, great in 4K. Ooh, 4K. Ooh. Joe says, Africa and station wagons was my fave. Drew says, we crazy MFers. That's right. That's right. Crazy. You boys are crazy. Dude, what if there should be like an Irish Tatooine, like the Irish in the desert. We have not seen, maybe that's just Australia. Irish in the desert. Is that what that is? The Australian Special Forces? Australian SAS? I'd watch that. Is there like, I'm thinking of Simon Pegg, but he's British, isn't he? Is there a famous Irish actor that's been in a desert movie? Has that happened? I was reading about the SAS a couple of years ago. It was a book like the history of the SAS, and they had like the South African and like Commonwealth SAS is no joke, because like the beauty of the Commonwealth is that they can draw from all over the world. So if you have a conflict in a specific climate, well, as the Commonwealth of England, as the Queen's Army, there is probably a domestic force somewhere in your empire that has access to train in that environment. So you got like Nepal, you got like parts of India, you got Australia, New Zealand, you got some weird island regions, you probably got some territories in the Caribbean, South America. You know, you could borrow some land from the United States. Canada is close enough to the U.S. You got all that kind of stuff. You got friends in all the places. And how did they do that? Tea, money. It wasn't. It was, well, English law is always the #1 export in England. English common law and banking, capital markets. That's the big export. Apparently, that's more important than food if you want to create a global empire. You don't need tasty food. You just need currency and tea, caffeine and tea, man. That's what's up. I don't drink much tea. I like coffee. Maybe. I like coffee. What are we doing? We're just wasting time, right? That's cool. It's Friday. Getting something done. Drawing, just making up some details. What feels weird about this drawing right now? These guys are a little too light. But then again, this is going to be for print. Let's put a levels adjustment on this puppy. So a separate layer. It's a controller, and it allows us to adjust and unadjust. You can hide this thing. You can crank it up. Let's turn it down. How would this feel for print? Let's play around with the gray level. Bring that up. Maybe the light stays up there. Maybe the gray goes down here. Feels more like a pencil drawing, like a graphite drawing. What happens if we crank the dark up? Really dark. This feels inky. This feels more like a old-timey newspaper film noir photo. Heavy on the ink. Heavier on the ink. Is this interesting? So this is almost like a black and white. You can do all kinds of stuff just by messing with the levels. You can always turn this off, turn it back on. Let's just play around that. At this point, it's been 90 minutes or so. My eyes are so used to what I'm looking at, I need to refreshen them. So I might send them out to some friends, might flip it around, get some feedback. This is a great time to talk to your mentor, talk to your underlings. Hey, what do you think about this thing? What do you think? Devin says Ewan McGregor is Scottish. Made 2 great docs about going around the globe on motorcycles. Huh. I should watch that. That sounds great. And he's releasing a series on Apple Plus this month and going from South America to North. Electric Harleys. I feel like that's sacrilegious to have an electric Harley. I know they exist, but it just no brrr. I wonder how does he charge it? If he's going through remote areas of the Americas, I wonder how he's getting that thing charged. Maybe he's like sitting down and doing an Anthony Bourdain, like, drive for 3 hours and then sit and have a meal for 6 hours and then drive for another 3. Camp somewhere. Long way round. What is that on? Apple Plus? I might have to get that. I'm not big into the Apple ecosystem. It's like every 100 miles. God, what an arduous trip. I love my diesel, man. I was able to road trip around the country, do like 14 hours at a time. Just stop for 5 minutes, fill it up, get a Red Bull, take a leak, get back in the car, go another 6 hours. I could drive 8 hours solid with a tank of diesel without stopping if it wasn't having to pee. Long Way Up is a new one. Thanks, Devin. Very cool. Well, Devin, I'm looking forward to listening to you guys' podcast. I was holding on to that to when I ran out of words, I could start listening to your words and the words of your brother. And I'm very excited. I'm going to be listening to that. Let me give it a shout out. That is called the Makery Network Art of Craftsmanship. Where is it? The Big Wind of Four Brothers. So anyone who watches this in the future, check this out. Makery.network/The Big Wind Four Brothers. Makery. And this is Devin, and Drew is in it, and Dustin, my buddy from college, is in it, and their older veteran brother Derek, who went to Iraq. And we're going to celebrate the veterans today because 9/11, lost a lot of good firefighters, a lot of good people 19 years ago. It affected everybody who was alive at the time. For you millennials, people born in the 2000s, you weren't conscious yet. Everybody was affected by that date, what had happened and what had happened soon afterwards. It was the most united the United States ever was. 9/12/2001 was the most together every American felt. Like, oh, it's time to go kick some ass. We kind of forgot who we were. That wolf inside of us woke up because it got its tail bit real hard. Big fluffy white tail that we liked got chopped off by a bastard. Devin says it's also on all other podcast venues. Yes. Very good. Very good. Sexy voice. I need to talk to you guys about microphones. My last set of headphones broke, and I'm like real close to ponying up for a mixer and a nice broadcast headset. Kind of like those headsets we saw in football last night that Al Michaels has. Wonderful Al Michaels, and his beautiful, beautiful voice has like a big little fluffy ball at the end of the mic and some good speakers and a little mixer so I can adjust stuff. That's what I need. So I turn my head away, and I don't sound as good because the mic is here. Hey, love y'all. That was fun. Thanks for tuning in, Devin and Drew and Joe. And L tuned in and commented. Thank you all. That was fun today. Hope you got entertained and enjoyed my rants. I'm just being a little silly, being a little facetious, and we're having a good old time. Listen to the Makery Network. Also check out their, all the hard work that Devin has done with the art of craftsmanship. This is an excellent channel. Here we go. That's not it. That's an ad. Go back. I gotta get that YouTube red. So art of craftsmanship, beautiful work. That's Dustin there. Great YouTube channel. 86,000 subscribers, Devin. Well done. So Dustin, handsome Dustin, plays with tools in his cool little wood shop. Devin films it and edits it, and it sounds great. It looks great, and you get to watch handsome men make handsome projects. Bushcraft axes, hammers, all kinds of stuff. I love the mallet episode where he's just taking a piece of wood from a log and he carves it into a big Thor's wooden hand. This is just fun. I love this. It's so satisfying to see Dustin working with the wood and the old tools. Man, it's just It's something primal. It's something primally sad. I don't know. The textures are great. The color's great. All the goos, especially when he dips it in oil. Is there an oil dip in this episode? Yeah, that's my favorite part. This is my favorite part right here. Yeah, oh, that looks great. Look at that. Dustin rubbing the oil in. Mmm. Joe knows what I'm talking about. I love this stuff. Love it. Look at that. Oh, the color's so rich. Get a little bit of that shine in there. So you can use that in drawing. If you really want the contour to pop, just put a little layer of oil on everything and it just pop. You actually see the surfaces a little bit later because you get those highlights. That's why the bodybuilders all cover themselves in oil and like body spray and chocolate body. It's so that you can see all that definition. Boom, boom. If you put some oil on that, it would look real nice. Not like I haven't done push-ups in a month and a half. Boom. Yeah. All right, take care, guys. Love y'all. Bye-bye.